The biggest story in Asia Pacific in 2014 has to be the ongoing development of China's military capabilities and its strategic interests. Even though there are a lot of things on the periphery, whether that's the drawdown in Afghanistan or the election of Narendra Modi in Delhi, I think everyone really is reacting to and talking about what China is doing and how China is developing under Xi Jinping. If we look at what China did in its peripheries, if we look in the South China Sea, there was a lot of developments in terms of island buildings around the Spratly Islands and in the Paracel Islands. Of course, in May we had the incident with Vietnam over the positioning of an oil rig. Down in the Spratly Islands, there was island building across a number of reefs. That's going to be something to look at in 2015, especially as some of these reefs could have airfields on them, which would give China power projection capabilities in this part of the world that it previously didn't have. Beyond the South China Sea, if we look at Northeast Asia, ongoing tensions with Japan are going to be a major source of interest for everyone looking at that region. And of course, Japan's relationship with the United States is key to that, and how Japan and the US work together and develop their political military relationship in 2015 is something else to look at. What we've seen in Tokyo this year is a major change in collective self-defense, in the interpretation of that, which means that Japan can actually now go to war really to defend an ally, which is something that's never been able to do in the last 60 years. It's a major change in how it interprets how it can use force. On top of that, Japan changed its export rules in terms of how it's going to develop its defense industry. This is a big deal because previously, of course, Japan's defense industry only served the domestic market. Now they're looking to compete internationally. Most analysts, including our own analysts, believe this is going to take a while to kind of feed out because Japanese kit tends to be so expensive. But it does have some niche capabilities that give it options in the international market. One of those is the US-2 amphibian, which we think will be sold to India in 2015 if the contract goes through. Another area would be gyros and other kind of high-end kit that goes on the front of missiles, whether that's the Meteor missile with MBDA, which was announced earlier in 2014, and also PAC-2 sensors, which would be sold to Qatar, which is something that we've also seen. So there are a lot of options for Japan. Probably the biggest potential sale would be of submarines to Australia, but that's a long-term project and there's a lot to happen before that can really come to fruition. Australia's procurement program is going pretty badly across the board, it has to be said. The AWD, the Hobart-class destroyer program, has really had a terrible year in terms of politicians of both sides of the political aisle coming out and just really slamming it. The defence minister said he wouldn't trust the manufacturer ASC to build a canoe, although he did later retract those comments because he realised he'd probably gone a little too far. One of the issues that they have is it's a very, very complex programme, and over the years it's just really kind of had a mission creep in terms of how it's developed and who's been involved in it. Recently, they've just brought in a whole group of experts from various organisations, BAE Systems, Navantia and Raytheon, all coming in to try and write it. But it's over $800 million over budget as it is, and it's probably going to be delayed another year or so at least. That said, there have been some successes this year for the Australian shipbuilding industry. Navantia delivered the first Canberra-class LHD. That went into service. It was commissioned in November, which was a great success for Australia. So they're going to have two of those, and they're really going to give it a lot more reach in terms of humanitarian and assistance and disaster relief, and also in terms of power projection capabilities, because of course it's based on the Juan Carlos aircraft carrier. The Collins class replacement, that's a really big program. It's worth, I think, $26 billion Australian. That's going to be something that's going to go on for the next 15, 20 years. And so politically, it's going to be a big deal. How they decide, do they go with a Japanese option? Do they go with a European option? Do they go with an Australian local option? That seems unlikely, given the problem they've had with the Hobart class destroyer, but it's all to play for. I think most people have taken Modi's election, has seen it as a real kind of a kick up the backside for the MOD and for the kind of military geopolitical kind of community in Delhi. He's come in, he's made decisions quickly, especially on acquisitions. He's done a lot of good diplomacy. He's gone over and met Sharif in Pakistan. He's met Xi Jinping in China. So it's probably been a kind of a clean slate, and so far the omens are looking good for it. Of course, there are issues with India. Every bright dawn does tend to be followed by dark clouds. But we've seen there's quite a lot of procurements that are still waiting for sign off. The biggest is probably the Rafale procurement. How that plays out, it's $20 billion at the moment. Whether that gets approved this year or cancelled or suspended, it'll be kind of maybe an harbinger of how Modi's going to deal with these big issues.